Look, I don't have anything against positive thinking. I will always tell myself, okay, think positive, think positive, think positive. But you have to realize the downside to this. When you think positive, when you're constantly trying to get yourself to think positive, that means there's always a negative that you're trying to subside. And it ends up being this cycle of positive and negative thinking, of positive and negative thinking. The point of the positive is to overcome the negative. So when you're put in a compromising situation, it may not be easy for you at that moment to think positive. I have one word for you: dopamine. Dopamine is a feel-good hormone, and according to Health Direct, it affects the part of the brain that gives you feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. The hormone also plays a role in controlling your mood, memory, and so on. When you are doing something pleasurable and exciting, your brain releases the hormone, and then the dopamine gives you this feel-good feeling that you're always constantly going to want to go back to. When you eat junk food, or when we're always scrolling on our phones, that dopamine is constantly being released, so it makes us want to go back to it. At the end of the day, dopamine can be very addicting. And here's the part that you don't realize. Everywhere you go gives a hint of dopamine, gives a splash of dopamine, even through advertisements, social media, Google, work, whatever you're doing, people are trying to get you excited. People are trying to get that dopamine rush going. So you're constantly on this constant dopamine positive thinking high all the time. That's what they want. That's what they expect. When you go to New York or you go to any city and they have their advertisements up, it's supposed to get that dopamine going. You know what I mean? So they want you to be excited. They want you to get that release for something, because then you'll eventually come to it, or you'll buy the product, or whatever the case may be. But the thing about the dopamine high is eventually you're going to crash. Eventually, when there is nothing around you that's giving you that dopamine feel, when social media becomes a little boring for you, you're going to crash. And those crashing feelings can lead to depression, can lead to anxiety. It can make you feel down about yourself, make you feel insecure. You can feel empty or bored inside. Even when it comes to people who drink alcohol or people who smoke, they like the dopamine rushes. Dopamine is actually the cause for a lot of mental issues and some diseases. You have to watch your dopamine intake. This goes hand in hand with positive thinking, because that's exactly what positive thinking does. It releases that dopamine hormone. So you're also adding to this dopamine addiction that you may have, or the consistent dopamine that's always fed to you. And when we do crash, that's when the negative thoughts come. That's when the negative emotions and the negative feelings come, because these are thoughts, emotions, and feelings that we've always pushed aside. It's not anything that we ever dealt with. When it comes to your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, you have to understand that we live in a world today where we give our thoughts entirely too much power. And this might be controversial, but even with the thought of manifestation, where people say, oh, you write it down 3 times a day and you think it hard enough, it's going to come true. I love the positive thinking. I love where we're going with this, but that's false. The only way that you're going to get where you want to go is by doing. What you have to understand is a thought does not affect anything that you actually do. It may have an effect on your psychological, it may have an effect on your mental at times, but it doesn't affect what you actually do. It doesn't affect what's physically going on around you, because it's just a thought. Whether it's a negative thought or a positive thought, it has no real effect on what you are going to do, what's going to happen to you, what life is going to actually be like. But we live in a society where we have always conditioned ourselves to put so much power into our thoughts. You have to untrain yourself. You have to untrain yourself to not focus so much on what you think. You need to practice instead mindfulness. Mindfulness is a mental state. It requires you to be in the present moment. The process of mindfulness is being able to acknowledge your emotions, your thoughts, whether negative or positive. Being able to acknowledge those emotions, thoughts, and feelings and move to the present. So, meditation, for instance. When you meditate, you're supposed to focus on your breathing. It's not about keeping your mind clear. I think that's where people have the misconception. It's not about not thinking at all, like just getting rid of all your thoughts. No, because you're going to have thoughts, period. They may be less than, like the negative thoughts are going to happen less and less as you learn more about your mindfulness and as you become better at it, but you're always going to have those thoughts. The process of mindfulness is learning to accept the thoughts that you have, which allows you to be in the present. So when you're focusing on your breathing, let's say I have a negative thought, and what I do is I acknowledge that I have that negative thought. And sometimes it's hard for me to eat. Sometimes it's hard for me to take it in that I could possibly think something like that. When you sit there and you try to think positive about something, you're not accepting the thought. You're pushing the thought away, and that doesn't help you because that builds up. That builds up. And when you have consistent thoughts, like let's say consistent negative self-talks, you're going to start believing it. If you look in the mirror and you're constantly pointing out all the things that you think are negative about yourself, you're going to start believing it. You're going to start believing those thoughts. And instead of trying to say, well, this part of my body looks good, but I don't like this part of my body, but this part of my body looks good, but I don't like this part of my body, right? Instead of trying to do the positive and the negative and the positive and the negative, you just accept. You could just accept the fact that, okay, I may not like this part, or I may like this part, but at the end of the day, this is who I am. And moving forward, you have this intentional mindset of loving yourself more. And that's essentially what it is. For me, my biggest thing has always been productivity. If I feel like I'm not having an amazingly productive day, if I feel like I'm not getting things done, if I don't get everything done on my to-do list, I will literally just talk down on myself so much. And I have gotten to points where I have felt like I have failed. And not only did I feel like I failed, but I gave up. I stopped at the moment. And then I would put myself into this real deep depression because I just felt like I couldn't do it, or it didn't get done, or I got very disappointed in myself that I wasn't capable of being as productive. I had to learn to acknowledge the thoughts. Okay, you didn't get everything done last week. You didn't get everything done yesterday, but you have today and you have tomorrow. So I sit there and I say, okay, I'm not going to sit there and press myself about it anymore. I've acknowledged it. I'm not going to sit there and keep myself down about it anymore. I'm not going to sit there and dwell on the thought anymore. I'm just going to move forward in a way that I can make sure that I don't have to trigger those thoughts. Yeah, I didn't have a productive calendar, or I didn't do everything I wanted to do. Now tomorrow, I'm going to figure out a way for me to fit things or figure out what works best for my schedule. And if I don't make everything, that's okay, because guess what? I have the day after that too. So you have to put yourself in a place where you're not necessarily thinking positive, but you're thinking forward. Don't think negative, don't think positive, think forward. Mindful. When you're practicing mindfulness, you want to make sure that you are acknowledging your thoughts without judgment. It's so important for you to do that, because if you judge yourself based off a negative thought, you're just having another negative thought. I really need people to understand, and I have to understand myself sometimes too. When you have those embarrassing or even really vile thoughts, like let's be real, when you have those crazy thoughts that just make you think very ill about yourself, you have to understand one thing, if not anything, is that everybody has them. Everybody has had an extremely vile thought. And I love to think of it in a way of, okay, subconscious, like my subconscious has received so much unnecessary information that it just puts out whatever. at one time. So it's okay. Moving on. I had the thought, but the thought isn't me. I'm not going to give that thought power. So you really have to sit there and understand, I'm not going to give this thought power. I'm not going to judge this thought. I'm not even going to have any feeling or emotion toward this thought. I acknowledge it. I had the thought. Let's move on. Mindfulness is a very beautiful way of thinking. It's a very beautiful mindset. And it's all about really just accepting everything for what it is. We live in a world, again, where we don't allow ourselves to accept what's actually going on. We always try to find escapes. Alcohol is an escape. Marijuana is an escape. Social media is an escape. Music is an escape. Everything we do is an escape. We are constantly trying to find that. With mindfulness, there is no escape. That might sound so tragic, but it's not. Because when you're really at a point where you become truly at peace with yourself, you don't need an escape. What are we escaping? We're not just escaping negative thoughts. We're escaping us. We're escaping ourselves. We're not giving ourselves that time. We're not giving ourselves that attention. You thought something bad. You felt bad. You're hurt. You want to cry. Acknowledge that. Cry a little. Do it. Emotions are meant to be felt. Thoughts are meant to be heard. So when we're trying to escape, when we're trying to get that dopamine up, when we're trying to escape from what's going on, how we feel, who we are, we're not working in a place of mindfulness. And when you're mindful, you are in an accepting state. You are in a peaceful state. There are multiple ways to practice mindfulness, but the most effective way has to be meditation. It just does. It has to be. And what I used to get confused too is it's not the process of you not thinking. And if you try to meditate right now without ever meditating in your life, you are going to have a problem not thinking, because it's the first time that you're sitting there just with yourself. No escape. Remember, it's the first time you're sitting there just with yourself. There are different types of meditation. There's guided meditation. If you're new, if you're a beginner, go on YouTube, go on a podcast, social media, or even apps. Find a guided meditation. Find guided meditations that work for you, where they speak on what you can do to get yourself to that mindful space. If you want to meditate regularly, you can do your breathing meditation, where I spoke on focusing on your breath and releasing those thoughts. There's even movement meditation, where you walk. I believe dancing and even yoga is a form of meditation. So there's so many different types that there has to be something out there that suits you. And remember, when you're starting off, the purpose of it all is for you to be able to acknowledge those thoughts and release them. Acknowledge those thoughts and move on. When you practice mindfulness, you have emotional control. You have a reduction of stress. You have improved focus and clarity. You have enhanced self-awareness, which is by far my favorite. But you are so much more aware of yourself, who you are, how you feel. You're so much more aware of those negative thoughts, those negative feelings, and what triggers them, to the point where you're capable of maneuvering in such a beautiful, peaceful way. And then you even have better relationships, which is something that I am currently working on. But being able to put someone in a predicament that you love, that they can feel from you, that you're paying attention to them, you're listening to them, you're understanding them. You're really at a point where you have embraced them completely, and it makes people fall in love with you. I'm sorry, I don't know if you need to hear that, but it makes people fall in love with you, okay? When you're capable of making someone feel like they're the only thing in the world that matters at that moment, mindfulness does that. And it makes people want to be closer to you. It makes people, I don't know if this is the right words, but it makes people kind of addicted to you and your energy, bro. Remember that mindfulness is the gateway to lasting inner peace and resilience. By shifting your focus from chasing highs to being in the present moment, you reclaim power over your thoughts, feelings and emotions. As you begin your journey towards mindfulness, remember that every step counts and make sure you start a little at a time. Take steps, do a little at a time, a little here, a little there. And as you do that little, it's going to become bigger, longer, and you're going to see so many different changes with you as a person, as a human being, as a spirit, as life. So, remember, we're not thinking positive, we're thinking mindfully. And if anything, we're going to think forward. Let's do this.